Olivia adjusted the hem of her blouse as she stood outside the grand wooden doors of her childhood home. The house was as pristine as ever, its perfect white columns and neatly trimmed hedges giving off an illusion of warmth that didn't exist inside. She let out a slow breath. Tonight was just a dinner, nothing more, nothing less. She had no illusions of heartfelt conversations or genuine affection, but at the very least, she had expected civility. She stepped inside, the familiar scent of rosemary and garlic wafting from the dining room. Her mother, Patricia, had always insisted on elaborate family dinners, more for appearances than actual bonding. Olivia had barely set her purse down when her younger sister, Eliza, strolled past with a smug smile. "Wow, you actually showed up," Eliza remarked, flipping her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder. "Of course," Olivia replied, keeping her tone even. "Wouldn't miss it." She could already hear Jake and her father talking in the dining room. As she walked in, her younger brother barely spared her a glance, too engrossed in his phone to bother acknowledging her arrival. Their father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, as composed and commanding as ever. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice but wielded his words like weapons, his presence alone enough to dictate the atmosphere of any room. "Olivia," he greeted, his tone as neutral as it always was with her. "Dad." She took her seat, noting how the air felt heavier than usual. Something was different tonight. Dinner began as expected, small talk, updates about Eliza's shopping sprees, and Jake's never-ending university expenses. Olivia contributed when necessary, but mostly listened, occasionally glancing at her father. He was waiting for something. Then, as plates were being cleared, Richard placed his hand on a neatly stacked document in front of him. The air shifted. Olivia straightened, instinctively bracing herself. "Since we are all here," Richard began, his voice cool, measured, "there's something I want to address." The room stilled. Eliza and Jake paused, sensing the weight of his words. Olivia held his gaze as he slid the document slightly forward. "My will has been finalized," he stated, looking directly at her. Something cold settled in her stomach. She remained silent, waiting. Richard exhaled lightly, as if bracing for impact. "You won't get a single penny." For a moment, the words hung in the air, pressing down on her like an invisible force. Patricia shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't object. Eliza and Jake exchanged glances, unsure of what to do with the tension that had suddenly thickened the room. Olivia's grip on her spoon tightened. Not from shock, she had suspected this for years, but from the sheer bluntness of it. She set her spoon down with deliberate calm, her expression unreadable. "Okay," she said simply, tilting her head slightly. She let a small, almost amused smile touch her lips. "Then don't expect a single penny from me either." Silence. Patricia inhaled sharply. Jake's phone slipped from his hand onto the table. Even Eliza, ever the opportunist, seemed momentarily stunned. But it was Richard who held Olivia's attention. His gaze didn't waver, but there was something in his eyes, something calculating, something displeased. She had given him the reaction he wasn't expecting. With that, Olivia stood, her chair scraping lightly against the floor. She adjusted her blouse, smoothing out non-existent wrinkles as she took one final look at them. The people she had sacrificed for. The family she had supported in ways they would never fully appreciate. "You're being childish," Patricia finally spoke, her voice sharp. Olivia let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "No, I'm just done." She turned, walking away as their stunned expressions burned into her memory. The sound of her heels echoed down the hallway as she reached for her coat. "Olivia." She ignored the voice behind her. It didn't matter who had spoken. None of them had ever stood up for her before, and they certainly wouldn't start now. She opened the door and stepped into the night air, inhaling deeply as she left the house behind. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. The door to Olivia's apartment clicked shut behind her, and for the first time that evening, she exhaled. A long, slow breath. The tension that had gripped her chest at the dinner table still clung to her, But it was loosening, unraveling with every second she spent away from that house. She kicked off her heels, unbuttoned the top of her blouse, and let herself sink onto the couch. The apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the city beyond her window. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating tension of her family's home. The smell of candle wax and linen, the soft glow of her reading lamp, it was hers. All of it. The first space in her life where she could truly breathe. Her father's voice still echoed in her mind. "You won't get a single penny." She had known this was coming. It wasn't a surprise. But something about hearing the words out loud, watching the smug satisfaction in Eliza's eyes and the quiet approval in Patricia's, made her stomach churn. Olivia had never been the favored child, but this wasn't just rejection. It was punishment. And yet, as she sat there, staring at the dim reflection of herself in the window, something in her shifted. A realization. They think they've cut me off. The irony of it made her laugh, quiet and humorless at first, then a little louder, as the sheer ridiculousness of it settled in. They think I needed them. That I was clinging to some desperate hope of inheritance. The truth was, she had been the one holding them up. She had been their crutch, their safety net, their financial backbone. Not anymore. Reaching for her phone, she opened her banking app. She scrolled through the automatic payments she had set up over the years. The bills she had been covering without so much as a thank you. The mortgage. The utilities. Jake's endless tuition fees. Her stomach twisted as she realized the sheer amount of money she had funneled into them. Not because she was obligated, but because for so long she had believed that was what family was. That giving meant love. That sacrificing meant she was doing the right thing. She had been wrong. Her fingers hovered over the screen for only a second before she started canceling. One by one, she severed the ties. The mortgage? Gone. The electricity and water bills? Cancelled. Jake's tuition? Over. Eliza's extravagant shopping habits, charged to Olivia's card every month? Done. Each tap of her finger felt like cutting through a rope that had bound her for years. A mixture of relief and something dangerously close to rage bubbled inside her. She hadn't realized just how much she had given them, how much she had allowed them to take. By the time she finished, her body felt lighter. She leaned back against the couch, inhaling deeply. There was an odd sort of peace in it. A finality. And then, the calls started. First, Patricia. Olivia watched her phone vibrate across the coffee table, the name flashing insistently on the screen. She let it ring. Next, Richard. Her father was not a man who called unless absolutely necessary. The fact that he was trying to reach her less than an hour after she had left the house meant he had already realized something was wrong. She let that one ring too. Then Jake. Then Eliza. One after the other, relentless. By the time her voicemail was full, Olivia had poured herself a glass of wine and settled into the quiet. She sipped slowly, savoring the taste of something she had paid for with her own hard-earned money, something that was hers and hers alone. Her phone lit up again, this time with a text from Patricia. "What the hell did you do?" Olivia smiled to herself as she typed back. "I did exactly what Dad wanted. I'm out." The response came almost instantly. "Stop being dramatic. You're still responsible for this family." Responsible. The word clawed at her, but this time, it didn't sink in the way it used to. She had been raised to believe that love was transactional. That to be part of the family meant to sacrifice, to give without question, to put everyone else first. And for what? So that they could discard her when it suited them? So they could use her and then cut her off the second she stopped being useful? She took another slow sip of wine. No more. Another text followed. This time from Jake. "What the F***, Olivia? My tuition." She didn't bother responding. Eliza's message came next. "Do you know what you've done? You're so selfish." Selfish. She used to flinch at that word. Used to let it sink into her bones. Used to believe it was a curse rather than a liberation. But now? She set her phone down, the screen still glowing with their desperate messages. She had been many things for them. Provider, scapegoat, fixer of problems they had created for themselves. But she had never been selfish. Maybe it was time to start. For the first time in years, Olivia felt something she hadn't allowed herself to embrace. Freedom. Olivia sighed as she stepped out of the rideshare and into the cool night air, stretching her stiff limbs. It had been a long week. The work trip had been productive, 3 successful client meetings, a secured contract, and a promotion that was all but guaranteed, but she was exhausted. All she wanted was a long shower, her favorite blanket, and the peace of her own bed. Her apartment building loomed ahead, tall and familiar against the city's skyline. She walked toward it, rolling her stiff shoulders as she fished her keys from her bag. The suitcase wheels bumped gently along the pavement, a soft rhythm against the quiet hum of the city. But as she neared the entrance, something made her slow down. A strange tightness curled in her chest. Something was wrong. Her gaze flicked toward her apartment unit. The hallway lights cast their usual glow against the building's smooth exterior, but her door looked unnatural. She took a hesitant step closer, her brows furrowing as realization sank in. Her front door was completely sealed. Thick industrial foam covered the entire frame, hardened into an impenetrable mass, rendering it useless. The foam expanded across the lock, the hinges, and the seams, bulging outward like some grotesque, frozen wave. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a message. Olivia's breath came sharp and fast. She dropped her suitcase, hands clenching into fists. Her mind raced through the possibilities, but she already knew. Yanking her phone from her pocket, she opened the building's security app, her fingers moving on instinct. She pulled up the recorded footage from the last few days, fast-forwarding through hours of quiet hallways and nothingness. Then she saw it. A time-stamped clip from 2 nights ago. There, standing in front of her door, was Jake. Olivia's grip on her phone tightened as she watched the footage unfold. Her younger brother stood in the hallway, dressed in his usual brand-name jacket and sneakers, shaking a canister of industrial foam. He worked quickly, methodically, spraying the substance over the doorframe, layering it thick and dense. And then, he stepped back, admiring his work. And he grinned. A slow, smug, satisfied smirk. The sight of it sent a slow burn of rage creeping up Olivia's spine. This wasn't just a prank. This wasn't just some petty act of frustration. This was war. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she replayed the footage, noting every detail. Jake had done this with intention, with full awareness of what it would mean. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't second-guessed. He had gone out of his way to destroy her access to her own home. The betrayal was nothing new, but the audacity of it left her breathless. She swallowed down the fury rising in her throat and forced herself to think logically. First, she needed to document everything. She took out her phone, snapping multiple pictures of the sealed door from every angle. The industrial foam had hardened completely, making it impossible to remove without special tools. It would cost a small fortune to fix. Then she took screenshots of the security footage. Then, finally, she called building management. The phone rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Yeah? This is Olivia Hayes from Unit 312, she said, her voice cool and precise. "I need emergency maintenance at my apartment immediately. Someone vandalized my front door with industrial foam." There was a pause. Industrial foam?" "Yes," she exhaled sharply. "Completely sealed my door shut. I have security footage of the perpetrator." Another pause. Then, "Damn. Okay, I'll send someone over, but it'll take a few hours. Might have to get a specialist." "Understood," she said. "And I'm filing a police report." That got his full attention. "Oh!" Yeah, you should do that." She ended the call and immediately dialed the police non-emergency line. As she explained the situation, her anger simmered beneath the surface, controlled but searing. She kept her voice even, professional, detailing every fact with precision. The officer on the other end took her statement, asked a few clarifying questions, then assured her someone would be in touch soon. By the time she hung up, exhaustion was creeping in again, but the fury still pulsed in her veins. She had been patient. She had been tolerant. She had been done with them. But apparently, they weren't done with her. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Richard, incoming call. She stared at the name for a long moment before answering. She didn't speak first. Olivia, her father's voice came through, smooth as ever, but carrying an edge. What's this about you calling the police? She closed her eyes briefly, biting down the bitter laugh that threatened to escape. Of course. Jake vandalized my apartment, she said evenly. I have proof. I'm pressing charges. There was a pause. Then, what will it take for you to drop this? Her grip on the phone tightened. Her father's voice was calm, controlled, the way it always was when he was handling something. It wasn't concern. It wasn't remorse. It was damage control. She could almost hear the calculation in his silence, the gears turning as he weighed his options. Olivia exhaled slowly, then said, $33,000. Another pause. The amount wasn't random. It was the estimated cost of repairs, security enhancements, and legal fees, all of which Jake had just dumped into her lap. Richard was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. Fine. The line went dead. Olivia stared at the phone, barely able to believe what had just happened. Less than a minute later, her banking app pinged with a notification. $33,000 deposited into her account. Labeled simply as, final payment. She let out a slow breath. The money was nice, but it wasn't the compensation that satisfied her. It was the fact that for the first time in her life, she had made them pay. The first thing Olivia did after seeing the bank notification was let herself feel it, really feel it. The weight of the number on her screen. The significance of what it meant. $33,000. Not a penny less. She wasn't just compensated. She wasn't just given money. She had forced them, him, to acknowledge her worth, her time, her inconvenience. She had made her father, the man who wielded control like a sword, pay for what his son had done. And the best part? He had agreed. Begrudgingly. Bitterly. But he had agreed. Olivia sat back in the Uber she had taken to a hotel for the night, watching the city lights blur past the window. The glow of her phone screen illuminated her fingers as she traced the number in her account. A final payment, her father had called it. The last thread connecting them. Let it be final then. She had no desire to drag this out any longer than necessary. She had already wasted too many years on a family that never valued her beyond what she could provide. This was the closest thing to closure she would get from them. And yet, as she stared out at the passing streets, something inside her still burned. This wasn't just about the money. This was about the years she had given, the love she had poured into people who saw her as nothing more than a financial plan, a walking, breathing bank account. It was about the long nights she spent fixing problems they had created, sacrificing her own goals for their comfort. It was about the sheer audacity of them, of Jake, of Richard, of Patricia, to act as if she had been the one to betray them. Even after everything, they were the ones angry. That thought alone made her fingers curl into a fist. A sharp chime from her phone broke her thoughts. A message. It was from her father. Richard, you got what you wanted. Drop the police report. Olivia let out a slow, bitter laugh. So predictable. She typed back without hesitation. Olivia, I'll drop it when my door is fixed. There was no response. Typical. She doubted he cared about her apartment itself. It was the record that mattered. A police report with Jake's name attached to it wasn't something Richard could easily brush under the rug. It was a blemish. A stain. And her father didn't tolerate stains. She closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the seat. The Uber slowed in front of the hotel, and she thanked the driver before stepping out. The moment she entered the lobby, a wave of exhaustion hit her. It had been an endless cycle of fights, of betrayal, of frustration. All she wanted now was peace. The receptionist smiled as she approached. Welcome. Checking in? Yes. Olivia Hayes. A few clicks on the keyboard, a scan of her ID, and within minutes, she was slipping into the quiet comfort of a hotel room. She locked the door behind her, letting out a breath as the silence wrapped around her like a much-needed embrace. She needed sleep. But as she lay in the plush bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind refused to shut down. Would this be the last time she had to deal with them? Would they really leave her alone now? Or was this just another temporary pause before the next inevitable storm? Her phone vibrated again. Another text. This time, it was from Eliza. Eliza, you're ruining everything. Olivia blinked, then let out a humorless laugh. Of course. Of course she was the villain now. Not Jake for sealing her door shut. Not Richard for enabling it. Not Patricia for standing by in silence. No, Olivia was the one ruining things because she had dared to demand consequences. Because she had dared to put herself first. It was almost funny, really. But beneath the amusement was something sharper. This was it. This was her breaking point. She tapped her phone screen and opened her notes app. If they wanted to make her the villain, she would own the role. And she would make sure the world knew exactly what had led her here. With steady fingers, she began to type. Every bill she had covered. Every sacrifice she had made. Every manipulative tactic they had used to keep her in their grasp. By the time she was finished, her hands ached, but the weight on her chest felt lighter. She copied the text and pasted it into a new post. Public. Let them see. Let them all see. And with that, Olivia hit publish. The moment Olivia hit publish, she set her phone down and exhaled slowly. A strange sense of relief washed over her, not the kind that came with closure, but the kind that came with finally speaking the truth. She had spent years biting her tongue, swallowing her anger, convincing herself that it wasn't worth the fight. But now? Now, she was done protecting them. Her post detailed everything, how she had supported her family financially for years, how they had manipulated her into believing it was her responsibility, and how, the moment she stopped, they retaliated. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the expectation that she was supposed to keep giving, keep sacrificing, while they took and took without hesitation. She didn't name them outright, but she didn't have to. Anyone who knew her well enough would understand exactly who she was talking about. And even if they didn't, it wouldn't be long before someone put the pieces together. The notifications started coming in almost immediately. First, a few likes, then comments, then shares. People weren't just reading it, they were responding to it. At first, the messages were from friends, former colleagues, acquaintances, people who had always suspected something was off, but never had the full picture. This is insane. I had no idea you were going through this. I always wondered why you were the one paying for everything while they acted like they were doing you a favor. Good for you. Cut them off completely. But then, the messages started coming from extended family. And that was when the real chaos began. Her aunt, Diane, was the first to call. The moment Olivia answered, Diane's voice was breathless. You did it, didn't you? Olivia didn't bother pretending to be confused. Yeah, I did. A short silence. Then, laughter. Took you long enough. Olivia blinked. Wait, what? You think I didn't see what they were doing to you? Diane scoffed. I've always seen it. I just didn't think you were ready to fight back yet. That hit Olivia harder than she expected. She had spent so much time feeling like she was alone in this, convinced that no one else saw what was happening. But Diane had known. And now, she was standing by her. They're already panicking, Diane continued. Patricia called my sister not even 10 minutes ago, practically foaming at the mouth about how you've ruined the family's reputation. Olivia let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Of course. Not sorry we treated you like an ATM. Not we should have done better. No, how dare you tell people what we did? Let them panic, Olivia said, stretching out on the hotel bed. I'm done cleaning up their messes. You should be. Diane hesitated. But be ready, Olivia. They're not just going to let this slide. Olivia already knew that. And within the next hour, her phone was flooded with proof. The first message came from Patricia. How could you do this to us? After everything we did for you. Olivia almost laughed at the irony. Everything they did for her? She left the message unanswered. Then came the next one. This time from Richard. Take it down. Now. Short. Sharp. Commanding, like always. She ignored that one too. Then Jake's message popped up. Wow, Olivia. You really had to play the victim? Hope you're happy. Everyone hates us now. Good. She didn't respond, but the satisfaction in her chest grew. Then Eliza, ever the dramatic one, sent a series of rapid-fire texts. I hope you're proud of yourself. You're humiliating us. What kind of sister does this? People are talking. Everyone's turning against us because of you. Are you seriously so bitter that you had to go and destroy our lives? Destroy their lives? They had no idea what destruction looked like. For years, they had drained her dry, taken every ounce of her goodwill, every dollar she was willing to give, and never once stopped to ask themselves what would happen if she stopped. And now, here they were, falling apart the second they had to stand on their own. A few minutes later, her phone rang. Richard. She debated letting it go to voicemail, but something in her wanted to hear his tone, to confirm that she had finally rattled him. She swiped to answer. There was a beat of silence before he spoke. You're being reckless. Olivia leaned back against the pillows. Am I? Yes. His voice was sharp, clipped. You don't air family matters in public. Funny, she mused. I don't recall you having a problem with that when Patricia was telling everyone I abandoned you. Silence. Then, you're not innocent in this. Olivia chuckled. You're right. I let you all take advantage of me for way too long. But that's over now. You think this is going to fix anything? His voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the frustration creeping in. You think humiliating us is going to give you what you want? I already got what I want. A pause. And what's that? Freedom. Another silence. Then, finally, Richard exhaled. You're making a mistake, Olivia. She smiled. No, Dad. You did. And with that, she ended the call. It was the first time in her life she had hung up on him. And it felt good. By the next morning, Olivia's post had gone viral in her social circle. People she hadn't spoken to in years were commenting, sharing their own stories about toxic family dynamics, offering support, and calling out the entitled behavior of people like her parents. But the best part? Her siblings and parents were silent. No more messages. No more calls. The damage was done. Olivia stretched out in bed, savoring the quiet. For the first time in her life, they were the ones left scrambling. And she? She was finally at peace. The morning after Olivia's post went viral, she woke up in her hotel bed to the sound of her phone buzzing against the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the half-drawn curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. The air smelled of fresh linens and brewed coffee from the hotel lobby downstairs. It was the kind of morning she used to dream about, quiet, peaceful, hers. Stretching, she grabbed her phone and glanced at the screen. Dozens of notifications. Her social media had exploded overnight. Comments, shares, messages from friends, acquaintances, even strangers. Some were supportive, validating her decision. Others shared their own horror stories of family entitlement, toxic parents, and the suffocating weight of obligation. You're so brave for speaking out. It's scary how much I relate to this. I wish I had the courage to do what you did. People like your family expect us to give without limits, but the second we set boundaries, we're the villains. You did the right thing. Her chest swelled with a strange mixture of relief and validation. She wasn't alone. The feeling was liberating. But there were other messages too. Angry ones. Bitter ones. Some from distant relatives who had suddenly decided it was their business to weigh in. Family is family. No matter what. You're going to regret this when you're older. Money isn't everything. Your parents raised you. You owe them. This is disgraceful. Olivia rolled her eyes and deleted them without a second thought. She didn't owe anyone an explanation, especially not people who had no idea what she had endured. Then, she noticed one unread message at the top of her notifications. Daniel, hey, I saw your post. Are you okay? A warmth spread through her at the sight of his name. Daniel. They had met months ago, back when she had started putting herself first. A mutual friend had introduced them at a charity event, and she had been drawn to his quiet confidence, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way he asked about her dreams rather than her responsibilities. He was an architect, thoughtful, creative, always seeing the bigger picture. And unlike everyone else in her life, he didn't see her as a provider. He saw her as a person. Olivia typed back quickly. Olivia, I'm better than I've ever been. A second later, the 3 little dots appeared, then his reply. Daniel, good. Because I'm taking you to dinner tonight to celebrate. She smiled, warmth settling in her chest. Olivia, you're assuming I'll say yes? Daniel, absolutely. And he was right. She would. Because for the first time in years, she felt free. Later that afternoon, she packed her bags and checked out of the hotel. The moment she stepped outside, she felt lighter. She had spent so long carrying the weight of her family's needs, the never-ending expectations, the silent pressure to always be the responsible one. But now? Now, the weight was gone. As she walked to her car, she pulled out her phone and checked her bank balance. The $33,000 from Richard was still sitting in her account. She had considered returning it, just to prove a point, but then she had thought better of it. Why should she? They had taken from her for years. This wasn't charity. This was repayment. And she was going to use it for herself. With that thought, she did something she had never done before. She booked a flight to Italy. For years, she had put off travel, telling herself it was irresponsible to spend money on herself when her family needed her. But they had never needed her. They had just gotten used to having her as their safety net. She wasn't their safety net anymore. That evening, she met Daniel for dinner at an upscale rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, twinkling lights stretching out for miles, a soft breeze carrying the scent of fresh basil and grilled seafood. You look different, Daniel said as they settled into their seats. Olivia arched a brow. Different how? He studied her for a moment, a small smile tugging at his lips. Lighter. She tilted her head, considering that. I think I am. For the first time, she wasn't constantly worrying about the next bill, the next crisis, the next favor her family would demand. She wasn't exhausted from being the one who held everything together. She was just herself. Over dinner, she told Daniel about her trip. Italy, he repeated, amused. You finally booked it? Yep. No more waiting. No more excuses. I leave in 2 weeks. He grinned. I'm proud of you, Olivia. And the thing was, so was she. She had spent years believing that she was only valuable if she was giving. That love meant sacrifice. That setting boundaries made her selfish. But she had learned the truth. Love wasn't conditional. Family wasn't about obligation. And self-worth wasn't measured by how much she gave away. Her father thought cutting her out of the will would devastate her. Instead, it had freed her. A week later, Olivia was at the airport, her passport in hand, waiting for her flight to board. The past few days had been blissfully quiet. No more calls. No more messages. Her family had finally gotten the message. She wasn't theirs to control anymore. As she sat by the window, watching the planes taxi down the runway, a familiar number flashed across her screen. Patricia. Olivia stared at it, waiting. Then, without hesitation, she declined the call. And just like that, she was free. The streets of Rome were alive with a kind of energy Olivia had never experienced before. Laughter echoed from outdoor cafes, the scent of espresso and fresh pastries drifted through the air, and golden sunlight bathed the ancient city in a warm glow. She walked along the cobblestone paths, her steps unhurried, a newfound sense of freedom humming in her chest. She had made it. For years, Olivia had dreamed of traveling here, of sipping cappuccinos in hidden cafes, of losing herself in art and history, of standing beneath the grandeur of the Colosseum and feeling small in the best possible way. But she had always put it off. Maybe next year. Maybe when things settle down. Maybe when I don't have so many responsibilities. Now, for the first time, there were no more excuses. She was here. And she had never felt more alive. Aunt Diane had been the first person she called when she landed. Tell me everything, Diane had demanded, her voice brimming with excitement. Where are you staying? What's your first stop? Olivia had smiled, adjusting her sunglasses as she stepped out of the airport. "I found a little boutique hotel near the Piazza Navona. It has a rooftop terrace." "A rooftop terrace? Oh, honey, you're living now." That made Olivia laugh. "I really am." And it was true. She spent her days wandering through art museums, eating fresh pasta in tiny, family-owned restaurants, and letting herself be. There was no pressure to check her phone, no weight of expectation dragging her down. She wasn't anyone's provider, anyone's safety net. She was just Olivia. It was on her third day in Rome that she met Anna and Luca. They had been seated next to her at a small trattoria, chatting animatedly in a mix of Italian and English. Olivia had been lost in her own thoughts, enjoying her wine, when Anna leaned over with a warm smile. "Are you traveling alone?" she asked, her Italian accent lilting. Olivia hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yeah, first time in Italy." Anna's dark eyes sparkled. "Then you must join us for dinner. Luca makes the best recommendations." Luca, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an easy smile, nodded. "It's true. I have a gift." Olivia had expected to feel awkward, out of place, but within minutes, she was laughing with them, sharing stories, feeling welcomed in a way she hadn't expected. By the time dinner ended, Anna had already linked arms with Olivia, declaring, "You are coming with us tomorrow. We'll show you the real Rome." And just like that, she was adopted. Over the next week, Olivia found herself surrounded by warmth, by kindness, by genuine connection. Anna and Luca introduced her to their friends, took her to hidden spots tourists never found, and made her feel like she belonged. One night, as they sat on a terrace overlooking the city, sipping wine under the stars, Anna turned to Olivia with a knowing smile. "You're different than when we first met," she said. Olivia raised a brow. "How so?" Luca leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You seemed careful, like you were holding something back. Now you look, how do you say, lighter." Olivia thought about that. They weren't wrong. For so long, she had carried the weight of her family's expectations, of their resentment, of their entitlement. She had been so used to being needed that she had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, to be surrounded by people who enjoyed her company simply for who she was, not what she could give them. It was a feeling she wasn't sure she'd ever had before. Anna reached for Olivia's hand, giving it a squeeze. "Family is not always the one we are born into. Sometimes it's the one we choose." Olivia swallowed past the lump in her throat, nodding. "Yeah, I think I'm finally realizing that." On Christmas Eve, Olivia found herself back home, not at her parents' house, but in her own apartment, hosting a gathering of people who had become her family. Diane was there, of course, sipping wine and laughing at Olivia's stories about Rome. Daniel was beside her, his hand resting comfortably on Olivia's knee, his presence grounding. They weren't rushing anything, but what they had was real. Anna and Luca had even sent a package from Italy, a bottle of wine and a handwritten note that read, "To our favorite American. Rome is always waiting for you." Olivia smiled as she read it, warmth flooding her chest. For the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel like an obligation. It felt right. She watched as Diane told a dramatic story about a disastrous holiday party she once attended, watched as Daniel chuckled and refilled her glass, watched as warmth and love filled her home. And as she sat there, surrounded by her people, she realized something powerful. She had never needed the family she was born into. She had found something better. Something real. Something chosen. And this was what family was supposed to feel like. The world outside Olivia's apartment was quiet. Snowflakes drifted lazily past the window, settling in soft piles on the rooftops and streets below. The city glowed with the warm, golden light of street lamps, casting long shadows over sidewalks dusted in white. Inside, the remnants of the Christmas Eve gathering lingered, a half-finished bottle of wine on the coffee table, plates stacked neatly in the sink, and the faint echo of laughter still hanging in the air. Olivia curled up on the couch, pulling a knit blanket over her legs, a deep sense of peace settling in her bones. This had been the best Christmas she had ever had. Not because of extravagant gifts or forced family gatherings. Not because she had done what was expected of her, but because, for the first time, she had spent it with people who chose her. Diane had left an hour ago, kissing Olivia's forehead on her way out, whispering, "I am so proud of you, honey." Daniel had stayed a little longer, lingering in the doorway as he helped her clean up. He had kissed her, soft, slow, lingering before pulling away and murmuring, "I'll see you tomorrow." And Olivia, for once in her life, hadn't hesitated before saying yes. Now, alone in the quiet, she let herself reflect. It had been nearly 6 months since she walked out of that family dinner, since Richard had declared that she wouldn't get a single penny from him. 6 months since she had canceled every financial tie to her family, freeing herself from the invisible chains she had worn for years. 6 months since she had stopped waiting for them to love her the way she had always loved them. Her phone sat on the coffee table, silent. There had been no calls from her parents today. No messages. And she preferred it that way. At first, the silence had felt unnatural, like something was missing, like a limb she had lost but still expected to feel. She had spent her whole life existing under the weight of their expectations, their disappointments, their manipulations. And for so long, she had believed that if she just did more, gave more, loved more, they would finally see her. But they never had. And they never would. Richard had been wrong about a lot of things, but he had been right about one: she wouldn't get a single penny from him. And it had turned out to be the greatest gift he had ever given her. Because she had built a life without them. A life that was full. A life that was hers. A soft ding from her phone pulled her from her thoughts. She reached for it, her fingers hesitating for a brief second before turning the screen over. A new message. From Patricia. "Mom. Merry Christmas. Hope you're happy." Olivia stared at the message for a long time, something cold and distant stirring in her chest. Not "I miss you." Not "I'm sorry." Not even "Merry Christmas, Olivia." Just "Hope you're happy." As if happiness was something she shouldn't have. As if choosing herself had been some grand act of betrayal. She let out a slow breath, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a brief second, the old version of her wanted to respond. Wanted to smooth things over. Wanted to ease the tension, to fix things, to make them love her the way she had always longed for. But she wasn't that person anymore. She had spent too many years chasing an apology that would never come. So instead of replying, she did something else. She deleted the message. And then, slowly, deliberately, she blocked the number. Then Richard's. Then Jake's. Then Eliza's. With every tap of her finger, she felt lighter. For years, she had let them control the narrative. For years, she had let them dictate how much of herself she was allowed to keep. But no more. She set the phone down and leaned back against the couch, exhaling a breath that felt like it had been trapped inside her for decades. She had won. Not in a way they would ever acknowledge. Not in a way that came with some grand, dramatic moment of realization on their part. But she had won because she had freed herself. She thought back to something Diane had said to her weeks ago when she had first started cutting ties. Some people will never love you the way you need them to. But that doesn't mean you have to keep waiting for them to. And Diane had been right. She had spent so much of her life waiting. Waiting for Richard to soften. Waiting for Patricia to stand up for her. Waiting for Jake and Eliza to be something more than selfish, entitled versions of their parents. Waiting for proof that she mattered to them beyond what she could give. But she wasn't waiting anymore. She was living. And for the first time, she was doing it for herself. She looked around her apartment, the soft glow of the Christmas lights she had strung up herself, the scent of cinnamon and pine lingering in the air, the warmth that she had created. This was home. Not the house she had grown up in, filled with cold silences and unspoken expectations. Not the family that had only ever seen her as a resource, a wallet, a problem to be managed. This was home. This was happiness. And she had built it without them. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Frowning, she stood and patted across the room, pulling it open. Daniel stood there, holding a cup of coffee, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Figured you might need a refill," he said, holding it out to her. Olivia blinked, surprised, but warmth spread through her chest. "You just happen to have coffee on you?" He shrugged. "It's Christmas. Consider it a gift." She laughed, stepping aside to let him in. "Well, in that case, come on in." He stepped inside, shaking the snow off his coat, his presence filling the space like it belonged there. And maybe it did. Because family wasn't blood. It wasn't obligation. It wasn't conditional love wrapped in ultimatums. It was this. A friend showing up with coffee because he knew she needed it. Aunt Diane's unwavering support, reminding her that she wasn't alone. The people she had met along the way, who had seen her, really seen her, and loved her not for what she could give, but for who she was. As Daniel settled onto the couch, handing her the coffee, Olivia looked around at the life she had created. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was hers. And as she curled up beside him, sipping her coffee, watching the snow fall outside, she knew, without a doubt, she was finally, truly free.